All right, Josh, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you again
Awesome.
for coming.
Thanks so much. Really thankful to be here with you guys. Yeah, like they were saying, I'm Josh Freeman, and I did come back and got married to Ashley, who is right here in the front. And she's actually been in Togo for 4 years. So she's the professional. I'm the one that's just catching up. I've been there about 1.5 years now. And so yeah, we came back to get married. And that was about 4 weeks ago, so we're professionals now. We got it all under control. We know how to do this, and so we're pretty new to it, but we're excited to be with you. There's just something about getting to worship in your own language that is just so good and so refueling, refreshing. We love getting to be in Togo, but to get to be with people singing in English and talking in English, it just is something special. So we're really thankful to be with you this morning. But it also makes me think about back in Togo, the pastors and the leaders and our friends that are there that are already finishing up church. They've already finished probably today. But just the way that they worshiped, and it looked very similar to how we're doing it here. They get together, they worship, praise the Lord, give thanks, and then they pray together. They open the Word, they teach, and they learn, and then they figure out how do I apply this to my life. Now, it looks a little different. Some are meeting in homes, others under a tree maybe a thatch roof or a different building altogether. And mostly in the area where we are at in Togo, there will be completely surrounding them with idols and different gods that their families worship and whatnot. And so that is the context of where they're at. And that is what me and Ashley and our team called the 6 Degree Initiative get to be a part of and what we do. And so as a team, we are working to raise up leaders, Togolese leaders, who are planting churches in villages that don't have churches, that don't have believers. And so through this, these churches will be launching pads to plant churches, and these churches will hold disciple makers who make more disciple makers. And so that is what we get to do, and we have an entire team that does that. We have different roles and pieces that we play, and we're just excited to see what God has already been doing and what he's going to do. So as a team, we're asking God for 190,000 disciples among about 10 unreached people groups between Togo and Benin. And so Togo and Benin are known for being the birthplace of voodoo. And so specifically in the places that we are at in Aneho, Togo, and Ouida, Benin. And this is known as the slave trade coast. For hundreds of years, this is where the slaves would come from. And 95% of the population in Haiti came from Togo and Benin. Even 10% made their way to America from Togo and Benin. And so this is a place that has been saturated with darkness and evil for years and years and years. But we're seeing God do some incredible things through the leaders and church planters that we have. And so currently we have 17 churches. That is just incredible to see what God's done with that. There were 3 churches about 2-3 years ago, and now we have 17 in the last 2 to 3 years. And so God is multiplying or beginning to multiply. And so the new question we're asking was, what's it going to take to get to 50 churches? And so that's the new thing that we're looking at, and church planters are going out and planting. And one that comes to mind is my friend Cujo, who I had the privilege of baptizing earlier this year. And so Cujo's been a believer about 3 years, but he lives in this place called Gladue. And this is known, the area where he's at is known for being a dark area saturated in voodoo. And so 3 years ago, there was not a known believer. In fact, Cujo himself wasn't a believer. But our pastor, Jonas, who sadly went to be with the Lord back in November, who was the one who started New Life Church, Togolese leader who started that, he went and evangelized in this area, and Cujo comes to Christ, and he discipled him, and Cujo comes to a point where he's like, I need to take this back to my village, and I need to share the gospel. I need to plant a church there. And so Jonas came alongside him and helped him and coached him and trained him, and he entered into our training development that we do, and he's still there, and I get to work with him on a regular basis. And he goes into this village, and he plants a church. And so through that, what that looks like is he's just going in and making disciples. He's telling people about Jesus, and as they come to faith in Christ, they begin to disciple, and from there, that just creates a church, and it starts right after that. And so he's been doing that, and there's been many people coming to Christ. But this village is known for not having a good water supply. And so Jonas was there, and he became burdened seeing that there's a creek up the road, and that's their only form of water, and it's very unsanitary. And people are sick and dying, and it's just known in this area that people's life expectancy is much lower than it already is in Togo. And so it just became burden of how can the church be a part of this to help this. We're bringing the gospel to them. They have the gospel, but now they're not have a good quality drinking water. How can we help with this as the church? And so through that burden, long story short, we raised money to drill a well. And we were able to do that, and that well was drilled, and we hit water there earlier this year, and that village will be forever changed just because they have fresh drinking water. But now what's so cool is Cujo's there planting a church. He's already planted a church. It's there. People are coming to Christ, and now he gets to tell a story that we're going to look at today about a different well that changed an entire city and another woman's life, a well that people come to get water from, but this woman leaves with the eternal living water that will never thirst again. And so Cujo gets to tell this same story in the same place in this village where people are coming and they think their life is changed, but he gets to tell them, well, just because you drink this water, you're going to have to come back again, but I'm going to tell you about somebody who's has the eternal living water that when you come, you'll never thirst again. So if you would, please turn to John chapter 4 as we look at the woman in the well. And so as we jump in real quick here, we're catching up where Jesus, at this point in the book of John, he's been baptized, he's been tempted, and he just got done talking to Nicodemus, and now he's entering with his disciples and going to a different place to Galilee, on the way to Galilee. And so it says, now when Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus was making and baptizing more disciples than John, although Jesus himself did not baptize, but only his disciples, he left Judea and departed again for Galilee. So he's leaving Judea, headed toward Galilee. But in verse 4, it says something. It says, and he had to pass through Samaria. And what's so interesting about this is he didn't have to pass through Samaria, because historically, the Jews would actually walk around Samaria. They would take, it's a 6-day journey to go from Judea to Galilee by walking around. It's only 3 days if you pass through Samaria. But the Jews hated the Samaritans so much that they would do whatever it took to not go near and to be a part of them. And so to look back at where this feud started, it started back when in the book of Kings around that time, when the tribe of Israel got separated into the northern tribe and the southern, and the Assyrians captured the Israelites in the northern kingdom and started to cast them out of the capital city, which at that time was Samaria. That was the capital city. And so what happens is you have all these foreigners coming in and they intermarry with the Israelites and the Jews that are left there, and that creates this new community. And what this is not necessarily just a mixing of races, but now it's a mixing of religion. And so Samaria becomes known for mixing their religion together. So they become an area that's known for, they worship the one true God, but also a bunch of little gods as well. And so it's really similar to Togo. In fact, we're in a village that we have a church plant in called Sangor. It's very similar in the sense that there is many, many idols in this area. As they come to church, there's 7 witch doctors within a 1-mile radius and idols everywhere. You can see an idol 50 yards from our church building. And this is a place that is just saturated in it. And so they come to church, though, and they're learning the Bible. And recently, we just did a study on who is God. Just simply, who is this God? Let's really look at who God is, because they have a different mentality of what that looks like. They know the word God. They even know that there's a bigger God. And so it was interesting as we entered into conversation and the teaching time afterwards, the questions that were coming up is like, yeah, well, we know there's one big God, but then there's also these little gods. And even the witch doctors know there's one big God, and he's got to give sacrifices to him, otherwise his powers won't work. And so it was this really interesting, as we walked through, we got to tell them exactly, no, there is one true God. And so that's honestly what the Samaritans believed and knew back during the time of the kings. And then when you look in the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, they are, it's when the Persians were in control, and the king released them to go back and to rebuild the tabernacle in the capital city, in Jerusalem. And so they go, and he releases them to rebuild the temple. And at this point, this is where the feud begins, because they didn't want to have the Samaritans enter in now, because they have their different gods, their different religions. And this, honestly, now you just add hundreds of years to it. And a lot more misconceptions and other ideas that come in. And now you have this giant feud between two people groups, the Israelites and the Samaritans. So this is the context that Jesus is about to walk into. And so it says he had to walk or pass through Samaria. He could have walked around like the rest of the Israelites, but Jesus had a different plan. He had to go because he had a divine appointment with the woman that he was going to meet at a well up the road. So he did have to go through this area, but he was about to enter in a place that, despite the differences, the cultural feuds, he had to go. Jesus had to pass through Samaria. And so the question that we should ask ourselves is, what is our Samaria? Where's that place that, despite the differences, despite the difficulties, despite uncomfortability, I have to go because those people need to know Jesus as well? That could look like our neighbors. That could look like our schools. It could look like our jobs. It could be our families. Those are even harder at times. Where is it that I have to go, that I can't pass around? I have to. I'm compelled by the Holy Spirit in this good news that I have received, that I have to go share it with someone. It reminds me of a story of my friend Etienne, who's a church planter. This is Etienne, and he is as kind and as nice as can be. He's got a stutter. He doesn't enjoy being the front man and leading, but he will do whatever it takes to get the gospel to people who don't know it. And so he goes to this village, this area that has no churches. And we were walking it back in the summer together. And I was like, what brought you here? Why did you choose this area? How did you even find out about it? And he said, well, I went to a funeral out in this area. And while I was here, I just started sharing the gospel with people in the area and discovering that nobody knew Jesus and they didn't have a church here. And so some people who heard the gospel asked if I would keep coming back. And now for him, this is a far place to go, and he would have to take a taxi because he doesn't have a moto to drive himself there. This will cost him a lot. It will cost him money and time and a lot of effort to travel from where he lives to this village to share the good news with them. He said, well, I'm going to have to think about it and pray about it. And so he goes away and he prays about it. He told me, he's like, I had to come. I had to come because I knew they don't have another way to hear the gospel. There's nobody else that's going to go. So I have to be the one to go and share the gospel and to one day plant a church. And so that's what Etienne did. That's what Jesus was about to do when he walks into Samaria. And so we continue on in the passage in verse 5. It says, he came to a town of Samaria called Sychar, near the field that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, so Jesus, wearied as he was from his journey, was sitting beside the well, and it was about the 6th hour. An important thing to note here that that John is drawing our attention to, is that 6th hour, which would be about noon. So this is not the time to be going out of the city out in the sun to a well, but he's wanting to pinpoint that because of what's coming next in verse 7, which says, a woman from Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink," for his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans." So this woman, just the fact that she's showing up the well at this time tells us she's got a past, she's got a story. Because to go to the well at noon in the middle of the day, so the wells are a common watering hole, community gathering in Africa, especially in Togo. And it's a place where usually the children and the women come in the morning hours before the sun is too hot and it's too bright. And this is a time where people come together and it becomes a community where you hear the gossip of the town and you hear what's going on in this family and that family and how everybody's doing and whatnot. And so that is the community that is being formed and what is happening. But this woman obviously doesn't want to be there in that moment. So she comes at a different time when nobody should be there, but Jesus is there. So that's what she walks up to is Jesus sitting at a well, but not just another man, but now it's a Jewish man. So everything about this is as radical as it can possibly be. I mean, it is a divorceable offense for a married woman to be talking to a single man at this time. So just that in general, right there, not to mention she's avoiding any personal contact because of her past that we will discover later on. And now this Jew is here to drink water and to talk to me, a woman, a Samaritan woman. This is as crazy and absurd as it can possibly be. In fact, it says, you don't have a jar. She says, you don't have a jar. How is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria? When you look at the original language, that's more of there's the thought that Jews wouldn't even touch or use the other utensils that Samaritans would use to eat. It was unclean. It was dirty, we can't touch it. So that idea of him touching the drink, not using it, but to just even touch what she has touched, let alone put her mouth to, is as radical and unbelievable as possible. But Jesus, again, was coming for a reason, to talk to this woman for a specific purpose. And so we continue to see as we go on in verse 10, Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him and he would have given you living water." Jesus is pointing her to now the point of why he's here. Is you came, you were avoiding me, you were avoiding people, you were avoiding your past and your issues and your problems to come get this water because it's a necessity. In fact, at this point, if she didn't have to come to do this, that would be the best news in the world because she could avoid all the shame that she has to as she makes this walk to get to the well and to draw from the well. But he's pointing her to a bigger purpose. And it continues on in 11. The woman said to him, "Sir, you have nothing to draw water with, and the well is deep. Where do you get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob? He gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did his sons and his livestock." And then Jesus said to her in verse 13, "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks of the water that I will give him will never be thirsty again. The water that I will give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I will not be thirsty or have to come here to draw water." I mean, this idea of, I can't imagine her thought process like, okay, wait, are you telling me you have this water that I drink it and I'll never have to come back? Great. Sign me up. Give me this water. I don't have to walk into this shame anymore. I don't have to deal with the problems of the difficulty of coming at noon to avoid the talk of the town and who are going to talk bad about me and whatnot. Just give me this water. I will take this water. And there's another interesting piece here is Jesus is sharing the good news of the gospel with her right now, right? Like, as a missionary, what I do is figure out how to share the gospel like really well. And it's always fun to see and watch other people do it and learn how they do it so I can also glean and learn how to do it better in different contexts and whatnot. And so I'm watching him, and he's sharing the gospel with her. And this is the perfect response that you want from somebody that you just shared the gospel with. Yes, I want what you have. Give it to me. That is the best story you could possibly have. In fact, I remember a time when I was in Togo. Actually, it was just a quick trip that I went on back in 2018, and before I had landed on the ground full time. And we were walking the area of Senghor, where we planted a church several years ago. And this was before there was a church there. There was hardly anything, but this is a place that was a village that was continuing to grow and to urbanize a little bit. And so we were walking around. We were just observing the land, about to go purchase it and make our plans for what's next. And then this man walks up to us, and he says, I feel like you have something to tell me. We're like, sure, yeah, we have something to tell you, and then we'll get to share the gospel with him. And so we shared the gospel with him, and he didn't come to faith in Christ, but it was one of those moments, like Jesus is entering into right now, of like the easiest softball, hit it out of the park, home run, share the gospel with this person who is asking for it. But this is what he does. He does something totally different than what you're trained to do in sharing the gospel. He says, Jesus said to her, go call your husband and come here. She asked, yeah, I'll take what you want. I'll take what you want to give me right now. Share the gospel with me. And he says, yeah, actually, go call your husband. And so imagine her shame with this statement. Those of us that know the story and what's about to come, when he says this, the fear, the anxiety that probably welled up in her as she's about to say, I don't have a husband, and I have a whole past, and that's why I'm here today, actually, at this time. So this would be like if you had been trying to share the gospel with your friend for so long, and they finally said, yeah, you know what? I actually want what you have. And you say, okay, well, first, you gotta stop drinking, and before I can share you the good news. Before this, we got to call you to repentance. And that is really what we are supposed to be doing. And we're going to hear later on how we're supposed to be worshipers of body and soul and spirit. All of our being is saying yes to Jesus. It's not just the good water that we can receive from him, but this is a holistic, my entire life has to be given for him. I have to lay down my life because Christ laid down his life and just accept freely the grace and the gift of God that Jesus showed us. And so that is what Jesus is saying here. Is like, wait, let's look at your sin. Let's look at your life. Let's see where it's at and bring it to light, because once we deal with this, you will have freedom. You will have life eternal, not because of anything other than I am going to wipe it clean. I am going to for in this case, and for her, I'm going to die for you, like he did for all of us, and save you from the sin and the shame that you are walking in. You won't have to walk in it anymore. And so he goes on in 17, the woman answered him, I have no husband. And Jesus said to her, you're right in saying, I have no husband. For you have had 5 husbands, and the one you now have is not your husband. What you've said is true. So he's just grinding it in, calling it out, pushing her back into the place that she wanted to avoid forever, but needs to sit in it for a moment to declare it and say, yes, this is the sin that I've walked in, the shame that I wear. And he's sitting there, and he's trying to call it out even more. And so verse 19, the woman said to him, Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you say that in Jerusalem is the place where people ought to worship. Now, when you're reading this, you're like, where did that come from? Like, what? Like, we're going one direction, and then she jumps a whole different direction. But isn't that's so normal, even in our lives as we become convicted with sin. Let me get out of this real quick. Let me change the subject. Or even, I was actually preparing for this message weeks ago, and I was in Cincinnati. I was sitting out at a Starbucks, and I was studying, and then I took a break because I was doing an interview for one of our an intern that may join us this summer. And as I'm finishing up with the call, this man walks up to me, and he's asking for for some money for the bus or whatnot, and just comes and sits down. He's like, well, I saw you had a Bible, and I figured that I should ask you for money because usually people that have Bibles are nicer. And I was like, okay, that's a good thought. So then I began to enter into a conversation with him and learn more about him. And he had just gotten out of rehab, and he has this past and whatnot. And so he just stops and cuts me off. He's like, do you believe that Bible? Do you actually believe that? And I said, yeah, I really do. I do believe that. And we started talking to him about his life and his past, and he told me that he had read the Bible cover to cover, and he's actually read the Quran, and he's studied all these different religions, Mormonism and whatnot, and he's like, I just don't know if it's for me, and I don't know how you see that Bible is the answer. So I began to enter into this conversation, and we go deeper into the gospel, which is now confronting the sin that he is living in and whatnot. And as he talks more, and then out of nowhere, in the middle of the conversation, stops me and brings up some old Levitical law and say, do you believe that? It was like a law of, well, if somebody takes your daughter as their wife or sleeps with them or whatnot, you are supposed to go and stone their whole family. It was like, okay, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but he wanted to quickly change the subject because we were pinpointing really directly right now on the sin that he was living in and how Jesus wants to save him from the sin, but you have to confess it and you have to believe, right? So that is in this moment what this Samaritan woman is doing. Is she is avoiding, this entire story is a picture of how she has been avoiding the sin and the shame in her life. But Jesus is going to confront it, and he does. And so we run from the truth, from the shame of our sins, but Jesus is going to call it out. And so in 21, we see Jesus said to her, woman, believe me, the hour is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. So he directly answers what her question was and is saying that well, we're told that this isn't for the Samaritans, that we can't have this, we can't have true worship of the God. But they also know that there's a Messiah that's supposed to come. And so with that, everything changes. And so he's pointing to that. He says, we worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. And in 23, but the hour is coming and is now here when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For the Father is seeking such people to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit, in truth. And so he is saying something radical again to this woman. He's saying that the Messiah is here and that all of this is beginning to change, that now the Samaritans and those that aren't Jews are going to have the opportunity to worship, but he's calling for true worshipers of spirit and truth. And so that's that idea, and we could spend an entire series just talking about what that means of God is spirit and truth and how we worship in spirit and truth. But it's the idea of this holistic life of our entire life is totally for Christ, and we worship him with everything in us. And we're going to see what that looks like in a second. In 25 it says, the woman said to him, I know that the Messiah is coming, he who is called Christ. When he comes, he will tell us all things. And Jesus said to her, I who speak to you am he. And this is as, climactic as can be, like in the movies. Think about the music is rising for that ultimate line. That is what he says in that moment, and everything is, this is as dramatic and as radical as could possibly be, the statement that he just said to her, that he is the Messiah. He is here to change everything. And so she's catching on now what this is all about. This is becoming different. This is more than just coming to the well to get some water and to avoid some talk. This is going to be something that's going to require everything of her. And so 27, just then his disciples come back. They marvel that he was talking with a woman, but no one said, what do you seek, or why are you talking with her? They were just amazed and this is a radical moment, that he's talking to a woman and a Samaritan woman as well. And in 28, it says, so the woman left her water jar and went away into town and said to the people, come see a man who told me all that I ever did. Can this be the Christ? They went out of the town and were coming to him. And I want you to notice in verse 28, so the woman left her water jar. She came to the well to get water. In fact, she didn't want to come to the well. She came at a different time to avoid anything, to avoid people and eyes and talking about her past and her shame. She came with this jar for the purpose of drawing this water. And instead, what she ends up leaving, she leaves that water behind, that water jar behind. And this is the picture of somebody whose life had just been radically changed by Jesus himself. Somebody who said this, who accepted the good news of what Christ was saying and had to go share it with the world. Just like Jesus had, he had to go through Samaria. He had to. Because of this woman. This woman had to drop everything that she was here for to go tell everyone what just happened in her life. She came for one reason, but she left with so much more. And this encounter changed everything about her, but this didn't just change everything about her, this changed everything about a city. The Samaritans come and they hear and they see Jesus. And so what this truth the truth that we can pull many truths from this, but what we can see is that Jesus is everything for everyone. Everything for everyone. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter the family that you were born into, the things that you've done. He is for you, and he's everything. There's nothing that can satisfy more than Christ. And so this truth calls us to three different things, I think. And one is that some of us need to come to the well. There are those that either have maybe grew up in church or knew these stories and knew this story really well, but have since kind of parted ways with it, or some that maybe have never come to the well where Jesus is. And some just need to make that initial walk to the well at the feet of Jesus, to lay down their water jar and to accept, because everything for everyone means you too. And so maybe that's you. Maybe that's somebody that has walked away from that. It reminds me of Etienne's story. When we look at him, his church planting and what he's doing right now, he had that moment. He grew up in a family that worshiped idols. He grew up in a family that didn't go to church. And one day, he heard the gospel from a pastor, Pastor Jonas, actually. And he heard the gospel from him, and things started to change a little bit. He wasn't ready to accept, but he was ready to listen a little bit. But he had these idols and these other things that he was worshiping and whatnot, and that was what his family did. And to leave that in this communal culture is suicide. And so he was not going to make a decision so quickly. But he started to come to church. He started to have Jonas come and share the gospel and disciple him more until he finally made the decision. So he came to the well. But then the second truth that I think that this can call us to is to lay down our jar. What is that jar that we are bringing to the well? What is it? You know, so some of us may be carrying burdens and past shames and past regrets that we're like, well, I don't want to bring this up. I don't want to say this. I don't want to do this because then maybe Jesus will love me less. Like we can logically explain how that's not true, but then to actually come forth and confess it and to live it is a different thing. But then there's other things too with our jars is life gets really, focused or distracted on my school is important, my job's important, my finances, that I have to hold on to this jar, this thing that really I need to be setting it down like the woman did. And all of a sudden, this jar doesn't matter anymore because only thing that matters is Christ and what he did for me. You know, this is not a story because we're anything special. It's just a story of God's grace. But Ashley and I, we went to the field single, not anticipating to find somebody that we were going to marry. And Ashley, she had to lay down that jar of marriage, and she was expecting a life of singleness as she entered the field. And for me, my story is a little different. I actually had to say no to a jar, another girl, because I felt God was calling me to to go to the ends of the earth and calling me to this specific mission in Togo, and she wasn't going to come. And so I had to lay that one down and say, this is what God's calling me to. And then we had to trust that God would, just comfort us and give us the joy and whatnot. And he didn't have to. Like, he absolutely did not have to bring us together. He didn't have to say, yes, Josh and Ashley will meet and we'll get to be married and have a family on the mission field. He didn't have to, but by his grace, he did. And we have that opportunity. But that first started with a place of we got to lay everything down and trust that God has it under control. So maybe there's a jar there. What's our jars? What is the jar that needs to be laid down that we bring in to our relationship with Christ that never should have been there in the first place? And then 3 is more of a call to action. I think we have to find our have to. Like Jesus did, and he had to pass through Samaria. He had to go. Like Etienne had to take the gospel to this village. We have to find that place that we are supposed to be going and being the light of the gospel in, and then take it there. So where is your have to? How the Samaritan, and then the question too at times is, well, yeah, but once we find our have to, how do I do this? And it gets really scary and it's hard to do. Like, well, what am I supposed to do once I find that place that I'm supposed to go and share the good news with? Man, this is what the Samaritan woman did. All she did was she told her story before Jesus. She said, listen, there was this man who told me all about my past, and they knew what her past was. So she was like, this was my story before Jesus, how sinful and shameful it was. And now this is what Jesus did for me at the well. He changed everything. He knew everything about me. And then this is my life today because of Jesus. These 3 simple things, and we're able to share the love of Christ, the light of the gospel, with somebody else. And then we ask, would you want to experience this too? This is just as simple as what the woman did. Come see Jesus. You want to come see him with me. And an entire city comes. And like when the disciples had come back, this next passage as it continues, we won't read it, it continues to go where they say, Jesus, you're hungry, you need to eat something. And he said, I can't eat right now. His have to was these Samaritan people. He said, that is my food right now, is going and sharing the gospel with them. That food won't even satisfy right now because the mission of God is more important than anything at this moment. The harvest is plentiful. It's there and it's ready for the plucking and for the taking. And so that is that feeling, that life, that total, I give everything for this mission. And so Etienne's have to. He planted this church earlier this year in this village. And so what's crazy about this village is there's actually 2 villages, and they're really close to each other, like maybe 200 yards apart, but they don't interact. They actually are jealous of each other, and they don't like each other, so they do everything to stay away from each other. And so he comes and he asks to plant 2 churches, one in this village and one in that village, because they don't want to do it together, being only 200 yards apart. But anyways, he does this, and something happens. The gospel starts changing the hearts of the people in these villages to where they come to him and say, hey, we're really close. Why don't we just build a church right here together, and we'll all meet together? That's a radical moment that happened for these villages, right? And it was the gospel that was changing everything. And so all because Etienne said, I had to go. Well, story continues. As they plant this church and they've outgrown the little building that they built for it already, people are coming to Christ like crazy and being discipled. And there's a village chief up the road who happens to be a witch doctor as well, calls Etienne up and says, hey, I want to meet with you. Will you come visit with me? And so Etienne comes, and the village chief says, hey, I'm seeing something happen up the road in these villages. They look different. Something's changing about them. What is it? And it seemed to happen when you came. And so Etienne gets to share the gospel with this village chief. And he doesn't accept in that moment to follow Jesus, but what he does, he says, Etienne, I want you to come plant a church in this village. And I'm going to give you a piece of property. I'm going to make sure everybody is there to hear you when you're here. And so this all happened when Etienne said, I had to go. Now, fast forward just because 2 weeks ago, we can update the story. 2 weeks ago, they go to this village. And they're disappointed. There was only 150 people there. Etienne was incredibly disappointed about it. And 30 people said yes to Jesus. I mean, this is a place that had no believers, no church before 2 weeks ago. And now there's 30 of them that are going to enter in discipleship, and a church will be planted as we speak. And it's going to continue to happen as people come back and enter in discipleship and continue to share the gospel because of what happened in Etienne's life when he said yes to Jesus. He laid down his jar, and then he found the place that he had to go, and he went, and he obeyed, and he followed it. And so what would happen if we live this truth out? You know, Samaria was reached with the gospel. In Acts 1:8, in the start of the church, when we look at that, it says, "You will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth." And Samaria represents our difference. It's not far in location, but it's different in mentality and thought. And so that is the call to go and to find it. And they found that, and that is the start of where the church goes, and where the church was started and multiplied back in Acts. And then now the question is, where is that for us? And I was actually on a call recently this week with had an opportunity with a couple of Converge workers to be on a call with a missiologist who his job was to research church planting movements, gospel movements around the world, and to dissect them and say these are the characteristics and how we can continue to apply and add these characteristics in our ministries to see this happen in other unreached people groups. And so we had the privilege and the ability to have a conversation with him. And he said something at the end. He said, the question that you guys should be asking is, what is it going to take? So not what are we supposed to do? Where are we supposed to go? What is it going to take for the Wachi tribe to be reached with the gospel? He said, that's a question that drives you to your knees in prayer to ask God, hey, what is it going to take? What is my role in this? How do I play this? How do I do? That's the question that we need to be asking in our life. What is it going to take to see my family reached with the gospel? What is it going to take to see my neighbor reached with the gospel? What is it going to take to see people in Papillion and Omaha and the surrounding areas transformed by the gospel? That's the question and the prayer that we need to be asking. And so as you are discerning and praying through this, I want to pray with you. I want to pray with you because we know that Jesus is everything for everyone. And so that means all of us and how we can, what is our role in this and what do I play in this part as I take the gospel to it? What's my have to? What are the jars that I need to lay down and whatnot? So I just want to pray for you as you discern and the Holy Spirit moves in you. What is your role in this? What is the part that you play? And where's your have to? Where's the place that you need to go? Father, I just thank you so much for the opportunity to get to open the word together, totally free of persecution, without fear of somebody barging in and stopping us or killing us. Or God, I pray that we would never take that for granted. God, that we would use this freedom to take it to our neighbors and our families. God, that those that don't know Jesus would come to know you. And God, I pray for this church as they enter into this time, as they're praying for their own lives on what it is, God, that you would start to touch their hearts as they respond to this message and your word. God, that they would that you would touch the ones that need to come to the well, those that need to lay down their jars. And God, I pray that you would put a passion, a burden on their life for people that don't know you, that they can be the answer to, that they can be the ones to take the good news to. God, I pray that you would begin to move in everybody's lives as they discern what that is. God, lead us and guide us. Continue to do amazing works that blow us, and let us never become satisfied. Let us never to become lackadaisical, but God, that we would just be in awe of who you are and what you continue to do around the world. God, I pray a special blessing for this church family. Thank you so much for what they mean to Ashley and I and the team in Togo. God, I pray that you would bless them, that they would prosper, God, that you would move in this place and that people would come to know you as a result of the way that they live their lives and share the gospel. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.